even know that I knew that he had retweeted it. When I read it, I was like,
he would be in
the Yang people would be.
The U.S. military is currently working on machines capable of choosing targets that will take lethal action. The secret effort is part of a Marine Corps program known as CMob. It is meant to demonstrate that vessels equipped with cutting-edge technology could soon undertake lethal assaults without a direct human hand at the helm.
Of course, there are some critiques of that program. Opponents have raised concerns about whether the actions of these AI machines could be predicted and hacked. Here to discuss the CMob program is the national security reporter for the Center for Public Integrity, Zachary Fryer-Biggs. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Such an interesting piece. People got to read it. My question to you is this how it all ends?
This Skynet question.
Yes.
So probably not. I'm not smart enough to really predict all of the future, but I'd say that this is the first step towards machines taking on more of a role in warfare, especially in the decision-making part. But we're not handing over nukes to artificial intelligence yet. We're not entirely abdicating any responsibility for military decisions. So we're not at the point where humanity is going to be wiped out.
So, Zach, tell us about that decision-making matrix.
Yeah.
What goes into the decision of an AI in order to decide what to strike and what not? Because there's a lot of there's a lot of harried questions here whenever it comes to that.
Absolutely. So, part of this is that these machines have become better at understanding their environment. And that was the real hurdle to allowing some of this decision-making to take place. So a lot of this is computer vision and their ability to look at an image and sense what the objects are and try to differentiate them. Now that those machines are getting better at that, the question is, okay, what are the risks you're willing to take? How close could a civilian be to a potential target and still strike? We're still not at the point of actually allowing the machine to pull the trigger. We're moving towards what they call human on the loop, which means that there's a person who's looking over the shoulder of the computer and saying, yes or no to the final decision.
Yes.
But that ability to recognize one's environment is what's moving us towards these machines making the decisions.
So give us the details about CMob that you lay out in this piece in particular.
So CMob's an interesting program because it was actually built originally on technology used for the Mars rover. They realized that if you had to remote control a rover on Mars, the time it takes for a message to get from Earth to Mars and back is so long that you'd never be able to effectively move the rover. So the Navy saw that technology and said, this could actually work in a lot of other domains. And so they started experimenting it for defensive purposes with small ships that would protect larger ships in harbors.
Gotcha.
And then other parts of the Pentagon saw it and thought, well, this could also work for offense. And so that's what CMob was, is taking that underlying technology and applying it in particular for marine beach landings is what they were testing. And so these boats were moving around in sort of these coordinated swarms, not controlled by any human being. Nobody was on board. And the idea was to see if they could position themselves effectively to fire guns and protect landing troops.
And how did it work out?
I'm told it worked out very well. They were very pleased with the movements, and they're still experimenting and trying to figure out how they're going to use it in actual combat.
Yeah, so lay this out beyond the Marine Corps. What are the other programs that are all incorporating this? Because, and what's the time scale? How soon can we expect to see this play out in the military?
So, there's a broad range of programs. The Air Force has something called Skyborg, which, is wonderfully named, where they're looking at unmanned large fighters, frankly. You've got land systems. The Army's working on one where the gun of a tank would automatically be pointed at a target based on what a computer finds. So, it's pretty much every branch. The timeframes we're talking about, we're still probably 4 or 5 years away from any of these systems being sort of able to control the totality of the kill chain as opposed to just individual components, which is where we are right now. But it's not that far. You got to think about, really, these programs were kicked off 5 years ago. In the last administration, there was a sudden push for AI to be integrated, and now we're starting to see the fruits of that investment.
What are the ethical concerns that are being debated?
So that's the big question. The technology is getting to the point where machines can make these decisions, but do we want to let them? And so there are a couple of major external panels that are considering this for the Pentagon, and the Pentagon is going to be listening to their recommendations. One of them has their recommendations due out next month. But there hasn't really been a decision yet. Right now, there are no restrictions. In theory, if you had a fully autonomous robot that could kill, there has to be a special review, but there's no actual barring of that being used by the military. Well, there's some talk about maybe there should be a limitation. Most military commanders don't want it, but we'll see.
Right. So we know presidential candidate Andrew Yang was interested in your reporting here. What do you think this is? What debates are going on at the decision-making level, all the way from the president to the candidates that you've heard on this particular topic?
So, we're seeing increased public scrutiny of the idea of allowing these moral decisions to go to robots. I think at the moment it tends to remain sort of in the tech sector. And so that's where the debate is among tech workers about do they want to participate in developing the technology that might be used to kill.
Oh, interesting.
And so we've seen some protests. The famous example of that is something called Project Maven, which was where Google employees decided they didn't want to participate in a program being used by the Pentagon. And we've seen some open letters from groups like Microsoft, employees at Microsoft. And so there's starting to be a little bit of movement afoot for these young tech workers not wanting to participate. Whether that ends up resulting in the unavailability of the technology for the Pentagon, we don't know yet.
Hard to slow down that progress once it starts rolling. What do other countries have? What are they developing?
So, we always talk about the big two other great powers. So you're talking about China and Russia. China, at the moment, appears to be applying most of their AI might towards domestic surveillance. That doesn't mean that you can't use that same technology and quickly roll it out for other applications.
Absolutely.
But that's where they seem to be putting most of their effort right now. When it comes to Russia, frankly, we don't really know. Vladimir Putin likes to make all of these claims about how he's going to give a nuclear submarine AI capacity, and there's been rumors about land vehicles in Syria that destroyed a town. But none of it's been validated, and given the general bluster that he likes to engage in, it's hard to tell really what they have. We do know that they're investing heavily and that they are making progress, but whether that means that they're anywhere near U.S. capacity, it's really impossible to tell.
Yeah.
Wow. Fascinating stuff, Zachary. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Zach. Appreciate it.
Coming up, which 2020 candidates are gaining ground in the African American and Hispanic communities? And another Republican announces that he is primarying the president.
Did President Trump tell allies that socialism might be hard to beat in 2020? And Joe Biden has been dominating headlines, but not particularly in a good way. Team Rising will weigh in next.